There is something growing inside your walls right now. You cannot see it. You cannot smell it yet. But it is already inside your lungs every time you breathe in your own home. Black mold, green mold, white mold. It does not matter what colour it is. What matters is that mycotoxins released by active mold colonies have been linked to chronic respiratory disease, neurological damage, and in vulnerable populations, death. The CDC estimates that 93% of chronic sinus infections in America are fungal in origin, and yet the solution that has existed for over a century, a white powder that costs less than $1, has been systematically removed from public conversation. Not because it does not work, because it works too well. The cleaning industry in the United States alone is worth $45 billion annually. A $1 fix does not belong in that economy. What you're about to learn was never supposed to reach you. And once you understand how deep this goes, you will never look at a bottle of bleach the same way again. In 1872, workers digging through the floor of Death Valley discovered one of the largest deposits of sodium tetraborate ever found on American soil. The mineral had been used for centuries across Central Asia and the Middle East as a preservative, a cleaning agent, and a medical antiseptic. Native populations in the Tibetan plateau had been washing wounds with borax-rich water long before Western science had a name for it. By the early 1900s, borax had become a staple in American households. It was used to preserve meat, sanitize hospitals, treat fungal infections on skin, and keep stored grain free from mold contamination. The United States Army used it in field hospitals during World War I. European textile manufacturers used it to prevent mildew from destroying fabric stockpiles in humid warehouses. For nearly 8 decades, borax sat openly on grocery store shelves, recommended by physicians and domestic science textbooks alike. Then, in the 1980s, something shifted. The EPA began a reclassification process that quietly repositioned borax from a safe household mineral to a substance requiring hazard labeling. The scientific basis for that reclassification was drawn almost entirely from studies funded by petrochemical and synthetic detergent manufacturers. Independent researchers who challenged the data found their grant applications denied and their papers excluded from the journals that mattered most. By 2010, borax had been effectively erased from the mainstream cleaning conversation. Not banned, not proven dangerous, just quietly made invisible. And that invisibility was worth billions to the right people. Borax works at a level that most commercial mold products never reach. When you dissolve sodium tetraborate in water, it breaks down into borate ions and a highly alkaline solution with a pH of approximately 9.3. Mold cells, like all fungal organisms, are extraordinarily sensitive to pH disruption. Their cellular membranes depend on a narrow chemical environment to maintain structural integrity. When borate ions penetrate that membrane, they interfere directly with the enzyme systems that the fungus uses to metabolize nutrients and reproduce. The mold does not just stop growing. Its reproductive cycle is chemically severed at the source. This is the critical distinction between borax and bleach that the industry does not want you to understand. Sodium hypochlorite, the active compound in household bleach, is a surface oxidizer. It destroys the pigment of mold, which is why the stain disappears. But on porous materials like drywall, wood, concrete, and fabric, bleach cannot penetrate below the surface layer. The mold colony living 3 mm inside your wall is completely untouched. It will return within 30 to 90 days, guaranteed. The bottle tells you that you solved the problem. The mold knows otherwise. Borax behaves differently because it is water-soluble and molecularly small enough to follow moisture pathways into porous material. It does not sit on the surface. It migrates into the same channels the mold uses to anchor itself, and it crystallizes there as the water evaporates. Those crystals remain chemically active for months, creating a mineral environment that is permanently hostile to fungal regrowth. A single treatment on raw wood has been shown in independent laboratory testing to suppress mold colonization for up to 18 months without reapplication. Here is where honesty requires a pause. Borax is not a miracle on every surface. On non-porous materials like glass or sealed tile, its advantage over other solutions is minimal, and in cases of severe structural mold penetrating more than half an inch into load-bearing wood, professional remediation remains necessary. But for the overwhelming majority of household and outdoor mold situations, nothing in a $45 billion industry outperforms what costs $1 per treatment. In 2009, the European Chemicals Agency added borax to its list of substances of very high concern, citing reproductive toxicity based on animal studies conducted at doses so extreme they were the equivalent of a human consuming 3 grams of pure borax daily for years. No occupational exposure study, no real-world household use data. Just high-dose animal trials funded and submitted by coalitions that included BASF, Procter & Gamble, and Henkel, 3 of the largest synthetic detergent manufacturers on the planet. The timing was not a coincidence. The global household cleaning market had just crossed $40 billion, and borax represented the single most viable low-cost alternative to every product in that portfolio. This is what $400 million in annual lobbying buys. It does not buy a ban. A ban creates martyrs and invites scrutiny. What it buys is reclassification, a hazard label, a quiet removal from retail shelves in the European Union, a generation of consumers who associate the word borax with danger without being able to explain why. The mold remediation industry, worth $13 billion in the United States alone, does not need borax to be illegal. It just needs you to forget it exists. Consider the economics. A professional mold remediation service for a single bedroom in an American home costs between $1,500 and $5,000. A 76-ounce box of borax costs $4.97 and contains enough material to treat that same room 3 times over. The $13 billion industry grows at 6.3% annually, not because mold is getting worse, though climate data suggests it is, but because the knowledge gap between what exists and what people believe exists continues to widen every year. That gap is not an accident, it is a product. You are not uninformed because the information is unavailable. You are uninformed because an entire infrastructure of regulatory capture, media adjacency and retail placement strategy has been built to ensure that when you see mold, your first instinct is to reach for a branded product in a spray bottle, rather than a mineral that has been solving this problem since before your grandparents were born. This is the moment you stop being a consumer in that system and start being something else entirely. What you do with the next 5 minutes determines which side of that line you stand on. The formula is simple enough that there is no excuse not to have it memorized before this video ends. Take 1 cup of borax, roughly 280 grams, and dissolve it completely in 1 gallon of hot water. Hot water matters because borax has a saturation threshold, and undissolved particles reduce the concentration of active borate ions in the solution. Stir until the water runs completely clear. What you have in that bucket costs approximately $1.20 and is chemically more effective against mold colonization than any product currently sold at Home Depot under a brand name. For surface application on walls, apply the solution with a stiff bristled brush rather than a spray bottle. The mechanical action of the brush opens the surface pores of drywall and wood, allowing the solution to penetrate rather than pool. Do not rinse. This is the step that almost everyone gets wrong when they first encounter borax as a cleaning agent. Rinsing removes the borate crystals before they have time to form inside the material. Let the surface dry completely over 24 to 48 hours. The white residue you see as it dries is not a problem. It is the active mineral anchoring itself into the substrate. That residue is the protection. For camping gear, tent fabric, and canvas tarps that have developed mold colonies during storage, the approach shifts slightly. Mix the same concentration but apply it as a soak rather than a scrub. Submerge the affected fabric section for a minimum of 20 minutes, then remove and allow to air dry in direct sunlight. UV exposure accelerates the crystallization process and adds a secondary layer of mold suppression. A tent treated this way and stored dry will resist mold colonization for an entire season without retreatment. Commercial tent waterproofing sprays that claim mold resistance retail between $18 and $35 per can and contain synthetic biocides that degrade the fabric coating over time. The borax treatment costs under $2 and does not degrade anything. For preventive barrier treatment on wooden structures, cabin walls, or any outdoor wood surface exposed to seasonal moisture, apply 2 consecutive coats with a 48-hour drying period between them. The double treatment increases the depth of borate penetration into the wood grain and extends the effective suppression window to approximately 24 months in moderate humidity environments. Pressure-treated lumber from commercial suppliers contains synthetic preservatives that cost the construction industry an estimated $2.1 billion annually. The mechanism those preservatives use to prevent fungal decay is, at its core, a more expensive industrial approximation of what borax has always done for free. Store your borax solution in a sealed container away from direct sunlight. It remains chemically stable for up to 6 months. 1 box, 1 gallon of water, 1 application, that is the entire system, and it has been waiting for you in the laundry aisle this entire time. What you just learned is not a life hack. It is not a cleaning tip. It is documented, century-old knowledge that a $45 billion industry has spent 3 decades and hundreds of millions of dollars trying to keep below the noise floor of public awareness. Every time you share this video, you are not supporting a channel. You're reducing the return on that investment by 1 more person. You're pulling 1 more individual out of a system that profits directly from their ignorance. That is not a small thing. That is the only kind of resistance that actually costs them something. If you found this information useful, do not subscribe because you enjoy the content. Subscribe because the next video is going to expose something that the $13 billion mold remediation industry considers even more threatening than this. A method used by Scandinavian builders for 400 years that makes entire structures permanently mold-proof at a material cost of under $10. That file opens next.